Why, hello there. Welcome. Come, get out of the bad weather and join us for a little rainy day reading. I'm here this week with Joe Stratman. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. We're also here with Megan R. How are you doing,
Oh,
ma'am?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
A pleasure. Today we'll be reading Clover by, of course, the group. I've been debating whether to do this all week. The Clamp. I can't do it because of Futurama. Every time I read Clamp, it's the you want the clamps. You want the clamps. I got the Chobits. I got X. Don't get hooked on this. They never finished it. I can't do it without hearing it in that voice. But yeah, so before we get started into what we're reading, Joe, you were actually the one that recommended we do Clover. So tell us why you thought this one would be a good series.
Well, it's short for one thing, 4 volumes, so it's an easy read. Since we do this every other week, it's probably not best not to throw Monster or something that huge out there. So it's 4 volumes, easy reading, and it's also my favorite manga artistically. As we'll get into, it might have a few writing issues, and if we're going to writing, I might like Galaxy Express 999 a little bit more. But from an artwork standpoint, this is like bar none my favorite manga ever.
All right, that sounds like a good reason to talk about it. But before that, of course, I must ask you both. Let's start with you again, Joe. What have you been reading lately?
As far as manga, I haven't been reading that much. I've been rereading volumes of The Disappearance of Nagato Yuki-chan, the manga that I have, because I'm reviewing the series, and as all the reviewers know, it's not exactly my favorite series, and I would call the manga the worst series I've ever collected. So
No.
I'm rereading it to compare and contrast and all that other stuff. So it's just more my assignment than anything else. But I have been reading Kino's Journey, the first book that was actually released by Tokyo Pop a while ago. I've been reading the book, which the translation isn't great, but it's, it gets the stories across. So that's good enough for me. And if it's not, the series is fantastic, so watch it. In fact, just watch Kino's Journey.
Wow, that's kind of impressive that you found that volume because those Tokyo Pop light novels are not easy to find and not all that cheap either.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I actually haven't heard of Kino's Journey. What is it?
Oh god, how to describe it?
Yeah, I say the Twilight Zone takes a road trip, but it's not exactly like the Twilight Zone. It's about this girl named Kino who she goes to every country in the world, and she only visits it for 3 days, and she learns about each individual country, and usually each country has one thing that they're famous for, like everybody took a drink at once and they can now read each other's thoughts, or they took democracy to extremes, or it's something like that.
The minute you said this girl
Lots
goes
of
to every
parables.
country in the world, my immediate thought, and this shows how terrible a person I am, Kino visits Saudi Arabia.
Oh.
That's terrible.
No, it's not quite that specific. I've watched at least half of this series, so Joe's description is fairly apt, but yeah, it's a difficult series to describe, but tonally it's very quiet, very understated, a lot of parables, kind of philosophical, but really good, and a really solid dub, which is unusual for ADV in that period.
Oh yeah, and what you have to get used to is the motorcycle talks.
Yes.
That's all you have to get
The
used to,
motorcycle
right?
talks?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, she has a talking motorcycle named Hermes.
that's wonderful. That's
And-
wonderful. I'd probably
And
watch
he
it
can't
just for
say
that.
words right, so sometimes he uses the wrong word, and Kino has to correct him.
That sounds wonderful. All right, Megan, what have you been reading?
Oh, I've been reading bits and pieces, really. My fiance's brother, who's a giant Gundam nerd, he gets Gundam The Origin basically as it comes out, so I read the most recent volume of that. it's a fairly interesting series. I would not call myself a huge Gundam fan in general, but Yasuhiko's art is just beyond amazing. And he actually makes that story comprehensible, even if I do not get the Char worship at all. Like, yes, I get why he's important in the story, but I do not know why, like, decades later, people just worship him like a god. But that's getting into something else entirely. Otherwise, a lot of volume ones, try to catch up on my backlog pile before Anime Iowa, which is kind of the big local con around here. Oh, what I include? Funny enough that you brought it up, I did read the first volume of Disappearance of Yuki Nagato-chan or whatever, and yeah, that was horrendously boring, and I can't imagine anybody picking that up save for the fact that it features the characters from Haruhi Suzumiya.
And I've never even seen Haruhi, so what does that leave for me?
Not much.
Yeah, it's basically the wacky antics of Haruhi Suzumiya without the awesome concept. So it's very boring.
It's every other high school series ever.
Yes.
What else? The first volume of the original Lupin the Third manga, which Tokyo Pop put out years ago. And that's a fascinating thing, because he's still working out kind of the main cast as they come along. He's got Fujiko. I think Goemon and Jigen have showed up maybe once, but not by name. But really, it's the art style that's the most fascinating. It's just this very loose, cartoony, raunchy body sort of thing. I'd be very shocked if Monkey Punch wasn't influenced by, like, what was going on, like, Mad Magazine at the time. Because it's very much in that vein, albeit far more action-oriented than just, dumb body jokes. Though they are in there.
All right. I remember watching Lupin when it was airing on Adult Swim. Like, I had to wake up at 5 a.m. just to be able to get ready and make it to middle and high school. So I always watched whatever was airing there. So every morning I'd wake up and I'd watch Lupin. And it set the day for me. Like, that was how I got through the day at school. Just always happy. Because that show, it was a ton of fun. All right. So for what I've been reading, I haven't picked up any new series lately because well, one, like, I've just been looking briefly at series for episodes of this show, and second is I've been trying to beat Fallout 3 Game of the Year edition, so that's a time sink. That is a big time sink. But
I'm more of a Skyrim person, but
I couldn't get into Skyrim, and I'll tell you exactly why. It's way too mellow and too boring for me because of that. There's just too many blues and stuff, which is funny I'm saying that after saying I play Fallout 3, because there's a ton of grays in that, but I feel like it does vary more the more you travel the world, and I feel like with Skyrim you always get the same blue hue on everything, regardless of where you go.
I'm on the opposite end. I love the way Skyrim looks, and Fallout just isn't for me because it's too dull, it's too gray, so it's just like, that's okay, but it's the same. You start playing it on Friday for your weekend, and then suddenly it's Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. But back to the manga I was going to talk about. I decided, after seeing, recently for IRD, we had our picks and our shit picks for the summer season. Or the seasonal reviewers did. Joe, you're one of them, so you partook in that. I want to talk about a manga series that I love that almost every single seasonal reviewer put on their shit list. And I believe the English name is Actually I Am. The Japanese name is Jitsu wa Watashi wa. And that is the vampire harem romantic comedy series. Are either of you familiar with it?
No, I didn't put it on my list. Just, I wasn't very familiar with it, and I didn't want to deal with vampires this year, or this summer, so.
Fair enough. So, I really enjoy it. It's about... I do not have the characters' names. It's about this guy who wants to confess to this girl in his class, and this is after he's recovering from a devastating rejection the year before, after having a girl who he had a crush on reject him before he even could confess. And this just devastated him for a year. And so he goes to confess to this girl, only to find that she is in fact a vampire trying to live at this school and have a normal school life. And now it becomes almost his responsibility to keep her secret, because if her secret's let out, she has to go back home. She can no longer go to school. And from there, it just becomes this wacky romantic comedy about him meeting all sorts of supernatural beings. There's an alien, a werewolf, and overall, it does start out as a very just kind of okay romantic comedy. And then it introduces the principal, who is a demon who revels in torturing her students. And then every chapter becomes a gag series afterwards of just the principal creating new scenarios where either A, her students' life are miserable, or B, she goes to destroy the world. Either on accident or in purpose.
Quick question. Is this a comedy series in the sense that it's all wacky, random things, everybody's shouting, or is it a comedy in the sense of, oops, I fell in boobs, I saw some panties?
First part, and the minute you said the second part, I immediately pictured To Love Ru. And I bet you don't like it, do you?
I've never read it. I've heard of it by reputation.
It has everything you've heard about
it.
it is true. About To Love Ru, it's true. It's horribly true. But yeah, it is a lot of that comedy, but it's also just like, it also features a lot of big setups to little jokes that work because of the setup. Because they're willing to go the extra mile to do the setup necessary. And it's almost funny that the romance, takes a backseat to the comedy at times, which really helps because it doesn't need to be about the romance, because you understand already that the characters love each other. In a way, I feel like it does what Nisekoi tried to do better, because it fully set up the characters, it fully explains, okay, this is going to happen, and then it just tries to have fun with how many things it can throw in the way without it being annoying. Like, I think I said it does Nisekoi better. I'd say because even though it tries to do this, the romances have still made more progress in 50 chapters than in Nisekoi with 150.
Well, it's not hard to improve upon Nisekoi.
Absolutely, it's not. But I really enjoyed this series. I find it hilarious, like, every week, and I was sad to see so many people like put it on their shit list for this season. I'll definitely be watching it, and I'm still reading it. So yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about Clamp. Let's talk about Clover.
Yeah,
Yes.
Let's talk about Clamp. It's in my head. It's in my head. I'm gonna do it like so many times. Let's just call it Clover, because I don't say it in Clover when I hear.
Okay.
But yeah, when you put this up for a suggestion, I was like, dibs, I'm calling this. I want to be on this podcast because I am a huge Clamp fan, which used to be a very common thing, but these days not so much.
Clamp has definitely fallen out of the general public. Like, I remember, like, even back in, I think I started reading a lot of series and meeting other people who read lots of manga back in 2007. Clamp was still pretty well known even then. But now, I don't think I've heard Clamp, like, even uttered in passing, like, in years.
People got really burnt on the non-ending for Holic and the just total clusterfuck that was
Isn't
Tsubasa
there a
Reservoir
sequel series
Chronicles.
to Holic?
To both, actually. Though I actually like Holic Ray. I am reading that currently, and while it would not make sense if you hadn't read Holic previously, I really like it. But Holic is my favorite, so... Anyway, as I was saying, I volunteered because I'm a big Clamp fan. I mean, Clamp is the reason I started reading manga. I started with Magic Knight Rayearth, so I've always had a soft spot for them, including today's work. So, yeah, I was pretty much given like, no, you need me on this podcast.
All right. And of course, as I've said before, Joe was the one who recommended it, and he's already explained his reasons. So, quick explanation of the plot. Kazuhiro, that's the name of the main character.
Kazuhiko,
thank you.
Yep. I wrote down all the names on a piece of paper.
Thank you, because I forgot to, which is terrible. But
I've got Wikipedia open in front of me.
Awesome.
So.
Okay.
And the book.
Yeah, that's a good thing about reviewing manga. You have the manga right in front of you, so if you need to look up something, it's right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
I do not have mine in front of me, and sadly my chair squeaks like a motherfucker when I move, so I'm standing perfectly still.
Mine too.
Yep. Alright. Kazuhiko, I believe we said his name was?
Yes.
Yep.
Kazuhiko is an ex-Black Ops agent who is retired. He's tasked with one last mission to deliver a girl, Sue, to a location. And along the way, a lot of stuff happens. People get in his way. It's revealed that Sue is actually a 4-leaf clover, which is, I believe it's described as a sorcerer? Like a...
Basically how this world works, it's got this kind of cyberpunk thing, but there's also magic. And basically the military had this project where they gathered all these kids to test their magic levels, and they assigned them basically as clover levels, 1 through 4. And Sue is the only 4-leaf clover, which basically means she is the most powerful magical being on Earth. And because of that, she has to be isolated, because if she grows attached to anyone or anything, she could very well destroy the world.
Or whoever she gets to attach to can control the world.
Yeah, that was the only part of that I fully got. Like, I'll be honest though, like, this is my first time, this week, reading this series for this was my first time reading the series. And I'll be completely honest, this is usually the series I like to sit down, I like to think over before and I did. I've been thinking on it for a couple days now. And so... all throughout, it's about this loneliness of this girl and finally meeting someone, and just the happiness of being with people almost. And that's what I got from my first reading of this. And you guys I'm sure have read this a couple more times than me.
Yes.
That I like the no hesitation in your voice there. That really solidifies how like out of the loop I am in this podcast. But I found it, I gotta admit, I really didn't like the paneling and pacing of the story.
I can understand your issues with the pacing, because if there's one way you could describe Clover, it's experimental. This is very unusual.
Very much
for
so.
Clamp. For anything before or since. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of vague on the details and just kind of parse it out as it comes, and part of this, we get through the story, and then we basically go into flashback to explain stuff. But the biggest problem, of course, is that this series is technically unfinished.
Yes, I just read that an hour before we sat down here. I went onto Wikipedia because something didn't feel right, and sure enough, the creator has said herself that it would need at least 2 more volumes to be finished. This is another fucking unfinished Clamp series.
No. People give them a lot of crap for not finishing series, but most of the time it's not because like, oh, we're bored with this, we're done. It's usually because the magazine is canceled, and nobody else picks it up. Or in the case of X, because there were so many protests in relation to like natural disasters and all that, they basically had to stop, and they got busy with other things and could never pick it up. I mean, I know people have given Clamp that reputation. It's really not as bad as people say, though.
I just find it funny that this group of 4 people have so many unfinished works under their belt. And I understand there are circumstances where it's forced into that. I still find it really funny that that someone like Kishimoto, who works with a few assistants, but generally writes the story himself, can finish Naruto at 700 chapters. That Kubo could say Bleach will end after this arc and still keep going, like 600 chapters. And then you have this like 200 chapter series, and with four people basically in the group, all working together, I believe. Like I'm sure there are like generalized jobs each of them has.
Yes.
But I just find that funny, and it really shows like every experience in every business will always be specific to you.
Well, they're also a little different, and they're not tied to a magazine, unlike a lot of those shonen authors who are tied to Shonen Jump. They can bounce around basically wherever they want to, but that creates a problem if the magazine you're doing one series for just crashes and burns for reasons you can't control. But yeah, that they're kind of... back to the story itself, they're kind of sparse with the details, and it can make things hard to follow. It doesn't help that it's told out of order, and we still will never get the last part. So
yeah,
you understand enough by the end of it. You understand why.
I'll be honest, I don't think it was sparse on details. I think this was a very simple story they were telling, and they told just as much as they needed to tell it. And the one thing I do like is that, okay, you kind of need to understand, the first two parts of the series are one whole story, and then the last two parts, which I think like volume 3 and 4, those are only flashback prequels that show what happened before the story. And of course, there is a cliffhanger at the end of the second part, at the end of the first story. But I think even without that being filled in, I think it's still a very generalized story. It's basically about this girl wanting to visit a place that she's always wanted to go to because she's never had interaction with the outside world. And now finally she has this one chance at it to spend it with the one person who I think she's only really known three people in her entire life. I forgot the councilwoman. But she's known the councilwoman, she's known Aura, who is Kazuhiko, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Kazuhiko's girlfriend, and she's known about Kazuhiko through word of mouth from Aura. And of course, a lot of what Aura tells her is very rose-tinted. It's very colored, so she just sees him as this great guy right off the bat. But then you have Kazuhiko, who basically... One thing I couldn't figure out by the end of part 3 is whether or not he knew that this was the girl Aura was talking about from the past.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Because I believe so. I think he might have had suspicions, though, because she sang the one song that she started singing near the end of their flashback, and yet she says she wrote that with someone else. I think Kazuhiko would be smart enough, or at least proved himself smart enough, to be able to put 2 and 2 together in the series.
True, it's just never made explicit, like, oh!
Yeah, it's never said, and it's probably better it's never said, because I think it never needs to be said. But
yeah, going back to the experimental qualities, I actually rather like what they did with the sparseness of the page. There's a lot more negative space than you usually see in Clamp manga, or heck, even most shoujo manga. Normally, it's very orderly, panels in place on a page. But here, they just kind of float all over. There's all sorts of negative space. And, of course, the endless repetition of Aura's songs. Just snippets of them all over the page.
Yeah.
Just in case it hasn't been hammered into your head hard enough.
Yeah. At least between volumes 3 and 4 have different songs that they use the lyrics over and over again.
Yeah, but they do. It's very much like you said, there's a lot of negative space, and oftentimes that negative space is just used to put the lyrics of the song repeating over and over again around. And like the first 2 volumes, it's always about it's this song that Aura and Sue wrote together. It's about wanting to find happiness. It's about wanting to go where you know you'll feel happy, and damn be the consequences. The third song, I believe, if I'm recalling right,
it's about love.
Yeah,
yes.
Basically. She's in love. This is Aura just fully enjoying the love of her life and the love of her career. And then the fourth one, I think, was the most interesting because it felt the most out of place. And I think this is why there was supposed to be 2 more volumes, because this told the story of Kazuhiko's friend Gengetsu and his live-in roommate, Ran, who is actually one of the only 3-leaf clovers still alive. I believe, Ran C was the name. And I felt like that is definitely why there should have been more to this series. They probably wanted more, because I feel like they wanted to set up this character, and that's why there was a flashback to them. But without the continuation, it doesn't feel like there's any reason to even bring up this character, because otherwise it would have just been a supporting throwaway character.
Mm-hmm.
It's the song itself is about rebirth, which fits with Ren, because Ren is one of 3 leaf clovers, and before he runs into Gengetsu, they are known as A, B, and C. B, when we get to the manga, is dead because A killed him. And
A is also Ran's twin brother.
Yeah.
Who's basically gone psychotic.
Yeah.
In his isolation. And he's basically like, I love you so much, brother, that I will kill you to keep you around.
I never fully get that mentality, but then again, I don't think you're supposed to.
Such is the
These
life
are-
of a yandere.
Yeah.
It would probably be weird if we did understand.
Very true.
Yeah. But
I would say, speaking of sparseness, that's also fairly true for the characterization. I mean, nobody here could be considered a deep study.
No.
it's a very simple cast of characters. Kazuhiko is obviously he's more the brooding type because he's mourning the death of his girlfriend. I wouldn't say like Sasuke levels, like it's understandable. It's understandable, which I'm okay with brooding, and you know, I'm okay with a melancholy character if it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, but overall, like he's a very simple guy. Like he knows how to fight because he was in the Black Ops. He's sad because his girlfriend just died, and he needs to figure out who killed her. Which I bet you that's another reason they wanted to continue the series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What it felt like to me was Kazuhiko is kind of the usual action hero filtered through shoujo's kind of sort of. He does have like his girlfriend's dead and he's trying to figure out who killed her, and he has like one last mission. You know, it's always the one last mission, and then he has to find this relationship with Sue, which is you wouldn't find in an action thing. It's
no, that's pure shoujo right there at work.
Yeah.
The fact he makes a relationship
pure
with Sue.
innocent ingenue.
How old do you think Sue is?
Teens?
early teens.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, which kind of made that a
Well-
little creepy, because he looks like he's in his 20s at least.
Well, this is Clamp we're talking about, and they are not shy about their fondness for age play, as anybody who's read Cardcaptor
okay.
Sakura can tell you. And you only need to look elsewhere because there's also a pretty heavy dose of homoeroticism between Gengetsu and Ran as well.
And
Not- I would
and
say
we
yes,
also
also
have the
Kazuhiko
villain.
and Bowls. I think it was pronounced as Bowls or Boars.
I'd say Bowls because BOLS. So
Who's basically this sadistic guy on the opposing side of the war that these two nations are fighting for reasons we never learn. And he just loves Kazuhiko. He loves him so much that he
this is
chops
the-
off his
yeah!
hand and sleeps with it every night. Doesn't that get you hot?
I forgot about that guy a bit. He was almost so irrelevant to the story, I had forgotten about him by volume 2.
He's just,
Like,
he's just this weirdness that just comes and goes because they need a villain.
Yeah.
A more specific villain.
Here's the thing. They already talked about how his arm had been amputated, and he had this really cool sword arm. And, like, he could do
he's
all
got like
kinds
this
of things.
cyber weapon thing.
And they needed something for him to do with it, so they have this villain. But the truth is, like, it's really not needed because the whole story is more about whatever war's going on between these two nations. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't, and it's fully understandable. It doesn't matter because the whole story is just about Sue and Kazuhiko's journey to their destination, and so honestly, it really does feel like they just needed something for him to fight, some reason for almost like for him to rescue Sue from during this journey, because obviously she's a national secret. She'd be important as the four-leaf clover if the enemy did catch her. And I'm guessing that is why he was in there. It didn't felt necessary for there to be a fight scene in this, especially like it's multiple times it happens. You've got the Black Ops invading, which is how we even learn that Sue has all these magical powers. Before then, we're just kind of eluded like, oh, she's very important, but we don't fully know why.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right.
So we've talked about the story. Let's talk about the art, because the art is really
I
the
like the
selling
art.
point here.
I like the art. I love that every character seems to be. This isn't me harping on the art, by the way. This is just me nitpicking a little something. I like how the artwork how everyone's clothing is, pretty normal for futuristic. Like, it's not too outlandish that at some point, maybe 100 years in the future, our clothing would have evolved to this.
Uh-huh.
Except Aura, even when off stage, it makes sense if this was just an on stage thing. Even off stage, she's wearing these, like, very. She's wearing the MTV dresses, you know, the ones that the celebrities wear. The one where, like, I have a photo of Katy Perry bookmarked in my folder off of Imager of her in a dress like that, similar to Aura's, but it's showing her nipples.
Yeah, she's got a very romanticized and somewhat eroticized costume. Like, everything looks either like a costume or a negligee.
Clover.
But anyway, I was just saying, this is probably my favorite work of mine that was drawn by Makona, who's usually the group artist. Usually, I tend to go more for the works drawn by Nikoi, she's usually the character designer, but she does a lot of the artwork on some of the more minor works like Wish and Legal Drug and now Drug and Drop. And she and Makona work together on Holic. Sometimes I find Makona's artwork to be a little excessive, especially like an X, this was roughly contemporaneous with. But here, I don't know, it just works. I mean, yeah, the character designs are ridiculous in the way Clamp tends to be, in that they're like 10 feet tall, shoulders like a linebacker, hips like a 13-year-old boy, and, you know, chins that come to just a diamond point edge. But it just works here in a way that it doesn't necessarily do in their other works, and I can't fully explain why.
I think I can take a little bit of it. It's because they also use the negative space, so there's that. You have the ultra detailed character work where they have their outfits that are people can wear them, but they're also super detailed. So anybody wanting to cosplay that is in deep trouble. But they also have this negative space, and there's a lot of whites, a lot of blacks, and
not a lot of excess, not a lot of shoujo sparkle, bubbles, flowers, feathers, whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really. I'm losing my words here. Excuse me.
I know it's tricky, but
it's very pretty.
Yes, it is very pretty. But I also like the whole kind of vaguely cyberpunky quality of it, which is very unusual for shoujo, much less for Clamp. It's kind of weird. It's somewhat cyberpunk, but it's also almost vaguely steampunkish as well. But it just gives it a different look, something weirder and distant and odd that's just, I don't know, it's appealing in a way I can't fully describe.
Mm-hmm. It has it's inspired by Chinese looks. It's kind of Baroque. It's kind of 1920s. It's kind of dystopian future. It's kind of the past. It's kind of the style.
It's kind of it's a mix of everything, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. I honestly never compared it to steampunk because it seemed like everything was like this super futuristic. I think it was the T-1000 from Terminator 2 that could turn liquidy. It kind of felt like every like contraption was made from that. Like just from the flick of your mind, you could like do all kinds of amazing things, and that's what it felt like to me. Just this such a future where everything is like mentally controlled, and you don't have to worry about hitting an on or off button because it's just in your mind. Like, because that's what it seemed like. There were teleporters. There's the wings that the four-leaf clover spawns into existence. Kazuhiku's arm just kind of turns into a blade without him really hitting anything, it didn't look like.
They're lightsabers. Bowles has a lightsaber.
Wait, who has a lightsaber?
Bowles has a lightsaber.
Well, that was a lightsaber?
Yeah,
I didn't notice that was a lightsaber.
Yes, it's true.
That's fucking awesome. I want a lightsaber. I want, like, a future. Dude, could you imagine having a fucking arm like Kazuhiku's, but it could also spawn lightsabers?
Oh, God.
Like,
well, in all fairness, he can basically spawn one of those, I don't play Mass Effect, so I don't know what they're called, but the blue glowing stabby thing.
Oh, don't
Help
look
me
at
out
me.
here.
I haven't played that either.
The melee weapon, that's what I call it.
Yeah.
Yes, that thing. Oh, God, my fiance is just gonna be so ashamed because he plays those games and he loves those games and he'll know what it's called, but yes, it looks like that and it's cool.
Yeah, it's The thing is, if you have it attached to your arm and you take a nap and you roll over the wrong way, you're dead.
Whoops.
Yep.
Well, no. Like I said, everything seems mentally controlled in this world. So I think when you're asleep, everything just kind of turns off.
Then you have a dream about fighting someone.
That's actually very possible for Kazuhiko, isn't it? Post-traumatic stress disorder in the future with a mentally controlled arm? That'd be terrifying.
Yeah.
Just
and if he falls asleep next to Sue and then he wakes up from one of those dreams, But Sue can
It's
handle
over.
himself.
He's just on the street next to a vending machine and some kid thinks it'd be funny to pop a plastic bag, so he goes, BAM! And all of a sudden he's just like, ah! And giant sword spawns from his arm.
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, we are getting so distracted.
I love.
know.
Well, to be honest, like this was supposed to be like only 30 minutes. We're nearing 40, so we should be wrapping it up.
I guess if I have one real nitpick, maybe the Aura songs don't work for me as well, just because music is always a hard thing to get across in manga. Just because without the audio, there's always something that never quite gets through, which makes it kind of challenging with the third volume, because that's all about Sue and Aura communicating with each other basically mentally and
They
coming
used a
together
telephone.
and writing a song. Well,
I would
Aura did.
love somebody to make a either short series or a movie on this, other than the Madhouse music video that was made for it.
Yes, I was actually going to bring that up. Is that it works better in that short where Aura's song is kind of the background to more or less.
They translated Aura's songs into like actual songs, because I'll be honest, like I tried singing the lyrics myself in just different ways to see if I could make them fit. And it's like the only way I could get them to really fit is just the very slow, very somber way, which I gotta imagine is how they went with the music video, did they?
Oh yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, are the lyrics translated, or are these literally the lyrics they had? Because if it's translated, you lose a lot of meaning because you don't get the rhyme.
It seems like it's just straight away translated, because like the lyrics I read were like true happiness, eternal happiness, go to find it, yay. It was like very straightforward, very hammer on the head of the nail with its translation. So I guarantee, like, reading the lyrics, I lost like a lot of stuff reading them that way.
Very likely. So yeah, I
When
guess
I
if we
read things, I don't really pay attention. I pay attention that the lyrics are there and kind of what they mean, but they're kind of peripheral to me, so they didn't bother me so much. I paid attention to the action a little bit more and, what they were talking about in the lyrics. But, yeah, definitely doesn't work as well on the page as it would if you could actually hear the songs.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I would always read the songs, like, I'd read the song, like, after I was done reading the page. And it would usually be shoved in a corner somewhere in just big black box, or it'd be in, like, just written out, like, in a little white box in the corner. It's always, like, it's never, like, fully in the thing unless, like, you see someone actually singing it. It's always, like, off to the side. Like, there is someone trying to sing just through every scene.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, but we should be finishing up because we've definitely gone over time again. So,
Yeah.
Joe, final thoughts.
My final thoughts are, it is very difficult to express how to use negative space in artwork from my, like, brief experience when I tried to be an artist and, like, failed in grade school. And this is how you would use negative space and how you can have detailed art but not keep it too busy. And the story is good enough that you can follow along. The characters are good enough that you can feel their emotions, even if it's tedious, even if they, express their motivations and what they're about too much. So I really got into it, even though I admit it is flawed. It is very flawed, and yes, it is unfinished.
As for me, I definitely like it. I wouldn't call it the most essential clamp work. It's not something along the lines of Cardcaptor Sakura or anything like that. But it's definitely something that anybody with an interest in clamp should read, if just for the art. If just to kind of see them at maybe their artistic peak, disputably, but certainly their most experimental.
All right.
I like experimental, so let's get that out of my way. My number 2 anime is Technolize, so things that are kind of weird kind of appeal to me. So it's not a stretch to say, yeah, this would very much appeal to me, and my favorite color is green, so there's that.
All right. I think this is a very simple, not well told, but all right story. Used to convey a very experimental art and storytelling style. And I think in this case, it does work. I talked before, I did mention I wasn't a fan of the paneling. And that's because sometimes just the way, sometimes text conversations would be thrown somewhere else when characters would be on another part of the page. Sometimes you'd kind of lose focus. And actually, funny thing, I've noticed that later in the series, it was very much, it was better. The series was better assembled at separating out, who's talking in which, box. And it used a lot of white and black in order to get that across, because I remember early on when Kazuhiko's talking to Bull, they have kind of this, checkerboard pattern to their text boxes, and at first, I honestly couldn't tell who was saying what. And I had to reread it, about 4 times before I figured it out. But overall, I think it does work out for the best. And I did like the characters a lot. There wasn't a lot to them, but I liked what was there. So, there's always that.
Okay.
So, thank you all for coming and joining us here on the Rainy Day Reading. The weather seems to be clearing up. Thank you, Joe, Megan, for joining me today.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you for having me.
All right. And be sure to tune in next time for we'll be looking at, I don't have the Japanese title, but it's People of the Desert, and this was an early work by Miyazaki. And I'm talking early, 1969, so wow. Oh, and before we go, though, Joe, Megan, I have something great to tell you.
Oh?
What?
Do you remember, Joe, when I asked you in Skype what Clover you meant if it was the clamp one?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's because I actually, tried to find it myself. I typed in, Clover manga, and I came across quite a few Clover manga, very obscure titles that I think would make great titles for this. So please, everyone, tune in next time when I bring Megan and Joe back to review another Clover.
Okay.
We're gonna have 4 of them. We're gonna have Clover month.
Oh, there is enough. There is enough Clovers to have Clover month. All right.
I've got to watch Steam Boy on the other podcast. So
I'm on that podcast too. I gotta watch Steam Boy too. Be
You
sure to
poor
watch.
souls.
I don't remember it being that bad, but we'll save that for another time. All right.
Yeah.
So be sure to catch me and Joe in Heavy Storms when we talk about Steam Boy with Whitley. Megan, of course, will always be over on IRD, and you do the manga test drive as well, right?
Yes, my own blog where I do weekly manga reviews at mangatestdrive.blogspot.com.
Excellent. Joe, anything else you need to plug?
No.
Okay, awesome. And I do Let's Plays, and I'm always on Twitter, so catch me there. Until next time, though, folks, later.
Bye.
Bye.